Hello, and welcome once again to another episode of Interesting Stories in the History of Diagnostics, brought to you by Halteres Associates. Today we're going to talk about, do we have a quorum? And in fact, I'm going to be talking about quorum sensing in bacteria and its potential in diagnostics. So for many years, people have been very curious about a particular phenomenon that occurs in bioluminescent organisms, like vertebrates and fish, which have light organs. And sometimes of the day, they're emitting light, and other times they're not. For instance, the bobtail squid from Hawaii is one that's been of a lot of interest. Its head tends to be bright at night and not during the day. And in these light organs, it grows a bacterium called Vibrio fischeri, or Alii Vibrio fischeri. And nobody really knew many years ago how that happened. How does the mechanism work, where sometimes it's shining light, sometimes it's not? It ends up that the squid is actually able to eject a certain amount of the bacteria from its light organ when it doesn't want light. And when that happens, and there's a much lower concentration of bacteria there, it stops emitting light. And then, come the night again, the bacteria grows back, and suddenly it's emitting light again. How the heck does it do that? So this has been investigated by a number of people. I think the person and group that's done the most is Bonnie Bassler, Princeton University, and her team. She's given a lot of talks on this, published very broadly. She's done a very nice TED talk you might want to listen to. And what they have found is that there are actually compounds made by bacteria where they can sense one another. These compounds that they have discovered are called autoinducers. And it ends up that at low concentrations of bacteria, not many of these autoinducers are bound to receptors on or in the membrane of the bacteria. And when that's the case, they stop doing something like emitting light. I'll come back to some other things later. But as they grow up and they increase the concentration of these autoinducers and more of them bind to the bacterium, they sense that more bacteria are present around them. And they get to a certain level, a quorum, when at that point they do something new, like emit light. And in addition to bioluminescence making light, it permits bacteria to change their DNA expression levels to do a number of different things. At larger population sizes, they can actually produce a lot of antibiotics, or they can produce what they call competence, where the cells are now able to take up DNA, or virulence factors, or biofilms. There are a bunch of things that they can do as a result of having sensed together that the population is at a certain level and they do something synchronously together. These autoinducers come in two forms, depending on whether you're a gram-positive bacterium or a gram-negative bacterium. If you're gram-positive, you make peptides. If you're gram-negative, you make small molecules. And each different genus and species of a bacterium makes its own specific autoinducer. So if you're in a population where a lot of other organisms are present, and you're a Pseudomonas aeruginosa sitting there wondering where your friends are, you will be able to sense the autoinducer coming from them and not the other organisms around you. So it's very, very specific, which is a very interesting aspect of all this. There actually have been attempts in the last several years, and Bonnie has written on this, to develop therapeutics where you block that capability of the organism to sense the autoinducer so it doesn't know it's in a large population and doesn't produce those pathogenic effects. So they've looked at this in Pseudomonas, in Vibrio cholerae, and a few other organisms. It's progressing, but I'm not aware that there are any commercially available therapeutics at this point. This also leads to potential pathogenic activity in these organisms. Given this information about the specific autoinducer that is present in a potential sample, like a blood sample or from urine or from some other biological source, would we be able to determine the presence of autoinducers at a high level, indicating that those organisms are ready to become pathogenic in that state? I mean, it could be our normal commensal E. coli. It could be things like C. diff, which is often present, at least in spore form, in many people, but not pathogenic in a particular time. When does it become pathogenic? It can be producing a toxin, but it's also probably talking to its neighbors about the fact that there are enough of them to turn the tide to become pathogenic. So there are a number of people now looking at using various methods to detect these quorum sensing molecules the peptides in the small molecules, depending on which type, from specific organisms as an indication of the presence and activity of pathogenic organisms. So I think it's very exciting, and look forward to hearing more from the community about how they're applying that to key problems in medical diagnostics. So I find this entire area of quorum sensing in bacteria to be absolutely fascinating, that the communication between them is indicative of what the entire population can do at different concentrations. The first time I heard of it, I immediately started thinking, my gosh, there's got to be some great applications in diagnostics. It's starting to appear in the literature. We're starting to see that people are noticing that there are likely to be applications of quorum sensing that are giving us information about human disease states that we've never had before. Thank you once again for tuning in to another episode of Interesting Stories in the History of Diagnostics. Thank you very much for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again real soon. This is Mickey Urdea for Halteres Associates. Bye!